Hello and welcome. This week on Worldview, we're going to take a closer look at the Mehul Choksi mystery case, as well as the role of Indian diplomacy in tracking fugitives abroad and bringing them back to face trial here.
Mr. Choksi will be deported from Dominica. However, we have requested Prime Minister Skerrit and law enforcement in Dominica not to return him to Antigua, where he has legal and constitutional protection as a citizen. In fact, we have requested specifically that he be detained and to allow law enforcement in India to make the necessary arrangements with the Dominican government to have Mr. Choksi returned directly to India.
Now, the case of Mehul Choksi, the diamond merchant who escaped investigation in India under the 13,500 crore Punjab National Bank loan fraud scam by taking citizenship in the Caribbean island of Antigua and Barbuda, is at the center of attention given events of the past month. After going missing for a few days at the end of May from Antigua, Mehul Choksi appeared in Dominica, which is an island nearby, taken into custody by police for illegal entry. He's been held there since pending his trial. He also showed bruises that he says were sustained during what he called an abduction attempt by Indian agents, along with a woman who he said fraudulently befriended him. Now, all those charges are being investigated in Antigua. What the Indian government hopes out of all of this is that the Dominican government will take a look at all the papers and decide to deport Mehul Choksi directly to India, something actually that the Antiguan government says it wants as well. Although the government has not said this publicly or admitted it, it is believed that it even sent an 8-member delegation of Indian diplomats, consular officials, investigative officials who landed in Dominica at the start of the hearing on board Qatar Airways Express executive jet. They were due to deliver documents to the court and perhaps take back Choksi. But as the case dragged on, that team returned to Delhi apparently empty-handed. Even so, several questions have remained unanswered through this entire process. The first one really being, how did Mehul Choksi escape India in 2018 in the first place? The second, why hasn't the Antiguan government that says it wants nothing to do with Choksi, it wants Choksi returned to India, why hasn't it expedited its own extradition case, even though that there is an agreement between both countries signed in 2018 as an extradition arrangement? The third, who is behind the mystery transfer of Mehul Choksi from one island to the other? There are two theories being given officially. Did Choksi, as the Antiguan government claimed, go off his own will on a pleasure trip or to escape Antiguan processes? Or the second, was he abducted? This is what Choksi has claimed in court. And if so, by whom? Were Indian agents or mercenaries actually attempting to bundle up Choksi, put him in a plane or something and bring him back to India to stand trial? Whatever the plan was, it seems not to have worked for the moment, seems to have been botched. So then finally is the question, what is the truth of Choksi's own citizenship and residency? According to the Indian Citizenship Act, he lost that citizenship the moment he acquired an Antiguan passport in 2017. But then Antigua's courts are actually hearing their government's petition that wants to cancel Choksi's Antiguan passport. Meanwhile, Dominican authorities have passed a law prohibiting his entry into the island of Dominica. So does this in effect make Choksi a stateless citizen? Big questions to be asked. And it isn't often that the ME has to deal with this kind of mystery and who done it. Officials now say that the process that has already dragged on since 2018, when the Interpol Red Corner notice was first issued, could not just take time, it could be long and boring. Remember that despite favorable orders in the United Kingdom in at least 2 other cases, that of Choksi's own nephew, Nirav Modi, who is a co-accused, as well as fugitive businessman Vijay Mallya, the procedures in the United Kingdom have meant that neither of those two have actually returned home, even though the UK courts and the government have ordered their extradition. Remember, inside the Ministry of External Affairs, it is the Consular Passport and Visa, CPV section, that is the nodal division, and it is the MEA as a whole that actually looks after as the central authority in any extradition case, case, working alongside the CBI, the Directorate of Revenue Intelligence, for example, the Enforcement Directorate, of course, as well. So let's just take a look at what has been the extradition record of the government, of the MEA in particular. India has extradition treaties with about 50 countries, remember, and extradition arrangements with about 11, like the one with Antigua. However, all the processes are so cumbersome, and what that means is even after a fugitive is identified abroad, a red corner notice is issued, an extradition request is made, there's still many challenges to the process, especially if this is a financial case, not a criminal or a terrorism one. Let's just take a look at some of the numbers. These are given by the Ministry of External Affairs, many of them in Parliament questions. Between 2002 and 2018-2019, about more than 60 fugitives have actually been extradited to India, of which about a third came back since 2014. But more than 300 such extradition requests are pending in various countries despite red corner notices, and the government explains that each one takes time, it takes effort, and it takes a lot of money to pursue. Secondarily, even as old extradition requests are being pursued, new ones are coming in. According to the MEA, as many as 53 new economic offenders fled the country between 2016 and 2019. The third challenge, when it comes to financial irregularities in particular, the paperwork becomes the big challenge. And just take a look at how it breaks down. The Directorate of Enforcement, for example, said between 2016 and 2019, red corner notices were issued against 25 people. Extradition requests issued for 14 people. Action under the Fugitive Economic Offenders Act, which is necessary, were initiated against 7 people, but just 3 people were actually brought back to India under the PMLA. In most jurisdictions, remember, the red corner notice will only ensure that the fugitive can be held or at most barred from traveling. But the case itself has to be fought in courts, and that means reams of documents, translations, officials, lawyers, all being flown back and forth. Then it is true that many countries will not extradite a fugitive if he or she faces the death penalty in India. They see it as a human rights violation. Some others won't extradite a third country's national as it may complicate bilateral ties, while even others will not extradite their own nationals in order to protect them. India faced this after the 26/11 attacks, and it wanted to extradite David Coleman Headley from the United States. Some of the famous extradition cases that have been pursued actually successfully, of course, include Abu Salem. More than about 2 decades ago, he was wanted for the Mumbai attacks. He was extradited by Portugal along with his partner, film actress Monica Bedi. Underworld Don Chota Rajan was extradited from Indonesia. Ulfa Assam Group chief Anup Chetia was extradited by Bangladesh. And of course, there's British businessman more recently, Christian Michel, wanted in the helicopter corruption case, who was extradited from the UAE. Remember, and you can see from these cases, it's a long and frustrating process, but extradition is only one of 5 ways that a government can actually, a state can actually pursue a fugitive. Apart from extradition, there's also deportation or expulsion. This is to convince the host country to send the fugitive back on their own as a sovereign decision. And this has been done many times. Terrorism suspects in particular from UAE, Saudi Arabia, Bangladesh, Nepal, who have come back to India. The second is to convince them to surrender, actually convince the fugitive that it's in their best interest to return of their own volition, sometimes through threats, sometimes through promises of leniency. The third is abduction, and that's the stuff spy thrillers are made of. It's done stealthily, often with the tacit complicity of the host government, as you don't want to threaten their territorial sovereignty. Such cases are many, but for obvious reasons not publicized, as they are not totally legal in international law. But remember, Israel's Mossad agency had a special unit for what they call Nazi hunters, who would go to different countries, brought back someone like Eichmann to stand trial in Israel. And then there are killings. These are even less publicized. But of course, the famous one was the hunt for Osama bin Laden after the September 11 attacks, when US commandos went and took him out in Pakistan. Now, the outcome of Choksi's case is still awaited, and the question remains, will Dominican courts decide to deport him? If so, where will they deport him to? Will it be to India? Will it be to Antigua? Or could they even allow him to go to a third country? The MEA says it will pursue all fugitives, no matter which country they go to. But as the past shows, this is much, much easier said than done. Now, we do have some book recommendations for you. There's a full manual actually called Extradition Concepts, Procedures and Practices by Indian Police Service officer Rupin Sharma. He was instrumental in bringing Abu Salem back. There's a book called Escaped, The Story of Indian Fugitives in London. This is by Danish and Ruhi Khan, a more recent book. There's Manhunt by Peter Bergen, On the Hunt for Bin Laden, as well as Exile by Adrian Levy and Kathy Scott Clark, also on that hunt. And finally, there's Spies Against Armageddon, on Israel's secret wars against fugitives. But that's all we have time for here on Worldview from the team here. Thanks for watching.